We'll turn it over to our auditor, Maria, for a little introduction of Chris and his team. And they're going to provide us an overview of the city audit. So Maria, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we have Chris Totel from her bank company, our external auditor who did perform the audit for 2020. And he's going to do the presentation on how the 2020 audit has taken place. Welcome, Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, I guess it is. Everybody can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. So thank you for having me to the committee of the whole meeting. Here to discuss the results of the 2020 City of Reading audit. Also appreciate your accommodation that I wasn't able to make last Monday's meeting. So thank you for accommodating me this Monday. We'll go through a brief introduction. We'll review the auditor's report for the year ended December 31st, 2020, some financial highlights, review the federal programs that we tested. We'll talk some internal control and compliance, and then some other communications. So brief introduction. This is my opportunity to remind you that we audit under 3 different auditing standards here at the city. We have our financial audit, which is generally accepted auditing standards. Our yellow book audit, which is government auditing standards, and that's looking at internal controls over financial reporting. And then lastly, uniform grant guidance, single audit, that's the federal programs portion of the audit. We'll give you 2 opinions, the first on the financial statements, and the second on compliance with the required direct material compliance requirements for major federal programs that we tested. The reporting unit here at the city includes a blended component unit, which is the Reading Area Water Authority. It's blended right into the water fund when you look at the financial statements. And 2 discretely presented component units, basically 2 entities that are so intertwined that they're related parties, that the Reading Redevelopment Authority and the Reading Parking Authority are included in the statement, but as a separate column off to the right-hand side. And lastly, the city's audit has continually gotten a little more complex. So we have actuarial analysis for your pension liability done by Conrad Siegel, as well as the actuarial analysis for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, think medical insurance after retirement, also done by Conrad Siegel, and an indirect cost allocation done by a company called Maximus. And we have 2 unmodified opinions, so clean audit opinion out here at the city. You're going to see as we progress through a lot of improvement here at the city over the last couple of years. So clean audit opinion, unmodified. We'll talk results of the general fund here. So 3-year running history and then the budget on the right-hand side. I'm going to use this just as like a template here. And the most important numbers I want to point out is on the bottom right-hand corner, the second number in off the right. You'll see a green bar, and that green bar, this right off the bottom, will say 2,438,312. It's right next to a negative 800,000 on the right-hand side. The 2.4 million represents the surplus for the City of Reading operations in 2020. Bringing the fund balance, which is the orange bar below it, to 34,969,742. And we're going to talk about the green bars above here. That's what makes up the substantial variances for the year. But I thought it was easier just to kind of give a quick snapshot first, and then talk a little bit more in detail as to each area. So again, this top chart just showing us again, that's that 2,438,312 actual number on the top left. We budgeted for a deficit of 800,000, giving us a positive variance of $3.2 million from where the city thought they would end the year. A lot of in and outs, but some of it makes a lot of sense when you just step back and think. So the effects of the pandemic were noted in several different revenue accounts. The first being earned income taxes, license permits and fines. So you think about your building permits, your housing permits, all decreasing in 2020. Charges for services, in particular, EMS and emissions tax. So basically very little emissions tax, and EMS overall charges were down. We did see an increase in real estate transfer tax, 2.3 positive variance. That's that other taxes number right here is the second line down. Real estate transfer tax, been a hot commodity in all of our municipalities so far. A lot of movement out there in the real estate market, and that helped offset some of those other deficiencies in revenue for the year. But if we look back at the top chart, you'll see the first line here. Total revenue did have a deficit of nearly $3 million from budget to actual in 2020. The surplus, most of which came right here from our expenditure savings. So capital projects, we had some reduction in some of the equipment that was purchased, really kind of looked at some of the spending and said, in a pandemic, we're not sure where we're going to end up. Local revenues are dropping. And the city did a nice job of tightening its belt and kind of looking around to make sure wasn't any excess spending going on. Not excess, but unnecessary spending, so to speak. We did notice some personnel costs under budget within public safety, some public works and community development. Community development, thinking about the fact that that also would include those building inspections and other inspections that go through the community development side. So overall, like I previously mentioned, $2,438,312 is a surplus in the general fund. And where that leaves us here on the balance sheet, that bottom right-hand corner, we'll see that same $34,969,742 is our reserve. And right above that, $30,665,239, that's our unassigned fund balance at the end of 2020. You will notice an orange bar right above this 30 million for 2,255,138 under budgeted appropriations. When we look at fund balance, we look to see what did the city budget to cover their 2021 operations, drawing from fund balance to balance revenue versus expenditures. So 2021 had a planned use of fund balance of 2,255,000. Therefore, when we look at the unassigned fund balance, you can't spend what you already spent once, so to speak. So that's why the unassigned fund balance is this 30,665,000. Still a very strong position from where we've seen. One last item I wanted to point out here on the balance sheet. The three orange bars at the top, we have cash. You'll see a pretty substantial increase from 7.1 million up to almost 13.9. Interfund receivables decreased and interfund payables also decreased. The city took an initiative here during the 2020 to really clear out some of these interfund accounts, satisfy some of these old balances, and also write off balances that were just deemed to be uncollectible, meaning that they were so old there really wasn't a lot of research as to where it went. This was a big step though for the city. It really cleaned up the balance sheet and made it more of a true picture of the operations between the funds. And this chart just shows the history. So we have a 10-year history now looking at this fund balance progression. Starting back at the end of 2011 at 19,221,943. Breaking in 2014, that dotted line represents the $22 million minimum that was put into place in 2017. And you see the city has consistently exceeded that minimum now since that 2015 time period, ending this year with 30,665,000 of the unassigned and 34,969 total fund balance. So really doing a nice job staying above that minimum of $22 million and building a fund balance reserve to be able to put yourself in a position to exit Act 47. Several other governmental funds out here at the city. We have our community development, the grant fund or the agency fund, shade tree, liquid fuels, and then our capital projects. The ending fund balance and the orange bar at the bottom is restricted for each one of those columns. So the money that's in the community development or shade tree funds or liquid fuels has to be used for those specific instances. Two things that kind of come to my attention when I looked at this schedule, the shade tree fund, which is right in the middle, the orange bar at the bottom actually shows a deficit of 10,838. A little bit of timing here. That deficit will go away in 2021 when the real estate taxes are collected. So not a concern, but just to point out there's a small deficit in that fund at the end of the year. And the two next to it, liquid fuels and capital projects, still some pretty substantial balances in these two funds. I know the city's been really working hard to start really spending down that liquid fuels and capital projects balances in a consistent, planned way. But we do have a pretty nice reserve here in capital projects, 16,817,000. I don't think in my history here at the city, looking at a capital projects balance, that the city's ever had that much at least set aside for capital projects that wasn't some sort of a debt related issue. So good to see the flexibility that you do have there on that capital projects front. Water funds. Remember, this is going to be including RAWA and the water fund for the city. The water fund for the city therefore holds the assets, leases them to RAWA. So we combine those two funds together based upon generally accepted accounting principles. 2020 column, we're going to come third orange bar from the bottom on the right-hand side. Will show a surplus of 3,344,277, bringing net position up to 22,324,000. RAWA had a nice year this year, bringing in a surplus. The Birdsboro Power Plant is doing a nice job adding some additional revenues for RAWA, and the city is also entitled to part of those revenues through the lease agreement, enabling you to pull some more additional funds. And you'll see the transfers out for lease payments this year, which is right below that green bar on the bottom here, 10,668,530. That represents the lease payment of the base payment, plus the city's share of the additional commercial revenue that was coming in from RAWA. Sewer fund operations, this then combines the retail sewer fund and also the sewer fund, so 54 and 55 for those of you who know the fund structure of the city. Revenue's down a little bit, not surprising, with just the way that the environment was in 2020 and collection rates in 2020. Coming down through green bar, if we come from the bottom up, you'll see the green bar income before transfers, 18,824,292 on the right-hand side. Transfers out of 6,859,000. Two pieces there, just in case anybody wants to cross some T's and dot some I's. That's the $3 million that is allowed under the consent decree to come out, plus some additional funds that were used just to satisfy some inter-fund activity. So nothing concerning there, but wanted to point out that you are limited to that $3 million for operations. That is only $3 million under that bucket. So that brings you to 11,964,000 as your change in net position for the current year, and brings total net position in that fund up to 186,083,000, of which 139 million, if we look at the bottom right-hand corner, second number up, 139,282 is your unrestricted net position, not including capital assets. So sewer fund's still doing very well, getting near the end of our sewer fund project here. So looking forward to seeing how that's going to mature as the capital assets, all finally come online. Lastly, solid waste funds and recycling and trash. Question? Solid waste fund, recycling and trash, revenue is pretty consistent. Expenditures are up a little bit from last year. So the green bar starting from the top, you'll see operating income on the right-hand side, 861,544. We did receive some recycling grants from the state. Coming down to a change in net position of the second green bar on the right, 889,656. So a little under a $900,000 surplus in the solid waste fund this year, bringing fund balance up to, or net position up to 5,578,832. I know there's a lot of talk out there in the solid waste world, especially in the recycling side. We see some costs going up. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the city progresses here, moving through the RFP process, I believe soon, looking for a new hauler. But I know that there's a lot of talk out there with recycling side of things. So statement of net position, just kind of taking a look at our overall balance sheet here for the city. A lot of numbers on here, but I just want to focus on one number here on the bottom left-hand side. It shows a deficit of 123,241,441. And that's basically, I say, pushes all your chips in. So this is saying of our governmental activities, so general fund and all those other little funds, community development, agency, capital projects, we have a net position of a deficit of 123. However, pension and other post-employment benefits are 150,821,000. So without those taking into consideration, remember the old days when we didn't have those liabilities on a statement of net position, you would actually have a positive net position of about $30 million. The deficit is not atypical. Many municipalities report on the cash basis when you're up to a certain level. So it kind of hides a little bit of that deficit in the net pension, but not atypical to see a deficit when we include the net pension liabilities. And again, you pay that through the MMO. You don't have to pay that all at one time. It's just through the minimum municipal obligation. You pay that every year. So I know it's lots of numbers. Before I get into some of the other charts here, any questions so far? Pension plan activity. So positive year. We saw some good investment activity. As of 12/31/2020, so a little bit behind here, but 12/31/2020, pension funds are all 70% plus funded, including two about 85% plus in your fire and O&E funds. Now, you look back at the history here, kind of bouncing up and down. You're definitely seeing a positive progression here, especially on the police side. Getting up above that 70% threshold is a nice place to be, to continue building upon that. This slide is a little bit of a different kind of graph here, but I wanted to show is the other post-employment benefit obligations. So this is, again, that health insurance primarily that's owed to individuals that are eligible upon retirement. The chart on the bottom shows the total obligation in 2020 on the right-hand side, a little over $67 million, $67,364,031. The dark blue in the chart represents the percentage that would be police at 46 million, the fire at 18, and then the AFSCME management at $3 million, which is the light blue bar at the top. So the city has this pay-as-you-go methodology, very typical. Basically, you're just paying each year within your operating budget, whatever the insurance costs are and the claims are for that year. You do have $1 million set aside in a trust. That brings that deficit down from 67 million to 66. So just something to keep in mind. We do have this trust set up as a mechanism to help fund some of this, hopefully toward the future. And to look at that $1 million and say, is there a way we can invest that a little bit more to get a little bit more out of that $1 million to get some sort of return? It's very much like a pension fund. The regulations are the same. So you have more flexibility to invest any money in these other post-employment benefit trusts than you do if it's just within the governmental funds of the city. That was the primary focus of setting up that trust. Some key footnotes.
Excuse me, Chris.
Yes, Maria.
Quick question. You think it would be ideal to invest the 1 million that is sitting on the OPE account that the city has, to put it on the side?
Yeah, typically it would be a good idea to invest that at least in some mutual funds, something along the way to get some return from that $1 million. Anything you can get just hedges against that liability. I know it's not a big dollar amount to start with, $1 million, but I just think any kind of return just helps out as opposed to sitting in a non-interest bearing or very minimal interest bearing demand account right now.
Thank you.
Quick snapshot of your federal revenues for this year. Substantial drop. We see 18 at $60 million, 19 down to 36 million, and this year it's 17. It all has to do with that capitalization of grants to clean water. That is the Penvest drawdowns related to the sewer project. So you can see how the activity has been slowing from 18 to 19 as we head towards completion here in 21, 22. So we see that dropping. We do see our first little blip of coronavirus relief funds, 268,975 on the right-hand side, second number from the bottom. That's actually the money that came from the county in 2020. We're going to see that number obviously start to escalate here as the ARP funding comes in for the state and local fiscal recovery funds going forward. And that will be that same bucket, that coronavirus relief fund bucket. For those of you who have been on council for a while, you're very familiar with this page. This is the audit summary page, comes right out of the financial statement itself. What you're probably not familiar with is all the check marks on the right-hand side for no's. This is probably the cleanest audit summary page the city has had in the last probably 5 to 10 years. The most crucial aspect I want to show here is that we tested the Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Program, the Highway Planning and Construction, that would be the River Road Extension primarily, and some other smaller projects. And then also the capitalization grants, which is the Penvest program for the sewer plant. In the federal awards, we did not have any findings in internal control or in compliance with any of the requirements that we tested in those programs. So big step forward for the city. No findings under the federal awards programs. And we do have still one remaining finding up here on the left-hand side. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, but still overall a huge step forward. The finding we have remaining, we still work through some account reconciliations, some material adjustments, gotten a lot better, but there's still some progressions. Certain funds, such as the self-insurance fund, wasn't really reconciled as timely as we'd like it to be. But I don't want to spend time harping on negatives because I don't think that that's really the best use of talking about this funding. I've talked about this before. You know, I'll flip to our rainbow chart here, so to speak. All findings are not created equal. So when I see the account reconciliation finding that goes back to 2011, each year has been a different progression of that though. And in 2020, I can tell you, while still some items need to be addressed, certain adjustments to like the sewer capital reserve fund, which is Fund 11, 12. Some items such as the self-insurance fund. Overall, the city did a much better job of presenting us reconciliations on the key accounts that were completed and didn't take much material adjustments to get there. We still had enough material adjustments that I needed to put this finding in based upon our regulations as auditors, but significant progress. And I just want to show, I mean, look at the chart here. You see back in 2011, 14, 13, 12, I mean, double-digit findings, through many years. So it's been a long journey to get to this point, but I think it's really important to bring to your attention.
Chris.
Yes, Jamar.
Would it be accurate to attribute all of that to the city's finance and accounting staff?
I'm going to say that I'm not going to attribute all of it to the finance staff.
A good majority.
But yes, I would say consistency in positions in the finance department make a big difference also. Having somebody in there who can really concentrate in the right position and the right skill set for that position has really helped the process. But I do also want to give credit to the community development folks. I mean, the CDBG program, getting through the entitlement program with that, and public works. A couple of years ago, the transportation program, some of that would slip through the cracks depending on who was actually responsible and the desegregation of a lot of grants within the city. But I would agree that the internal workings, and a lot of it had to do with making sure reports were just filed timely and they were filed properly, whether it be the MMO being calculated properly. Whether it be taking a couple of additional trips through the AG 385 report, the pension reports, going to the state and making sure the accuracy was being done properly there. And a big step was the Penvest program. So Penvest, you kind of had two things working in your favor. One, transactions started to slow as the construction project started to slow down. But two, you learned every year the city put another procedure in place to help oversee that. And you didn't have to turn over as much in some of those positions. So ultimately, overall, a really good job by many different attributes here. Maria, do you have?
I want to say thank you. I mean, thank you to our controller, Michael, behind me. He has been doing an excellent job. Thank you to the accounting department, the girls there. Everybody had their hands along with the city auditor in the audit. So I want to say thank you to the entire finance department.
Like I mentioned, a couple of key takeaways here. I couldn't agree with you more, Maria, by the way. It's a great job. Thank you. Total number of internal control and compliance findings, again, decreased to 1. Pension reporting and grant administration were not findings for the first time since 2011. So that was really the concentration for the city over the last year, was removing those 2 findings. Work to become current with your indirect cost reporting. That was monumental task trying to catch up on some years. And the city has gotten the proper documentation in place then also for Department of Housing and Urban Development to come in and have backup for indirect costs for the years. Those adjustments have continued to decline. And overall, the biggest takeaway here is the city's continuing improving the timeliness and accuracy of financial reporting. Mr. Kelly will, when we were doing the ARP conversation, so the state and fiscal local recovery funds, when you make your determination off of lost revenue, it was determined we were going to use the numbers that are input into the DCD report at March 31st. And a few years ago, I wouldn't have suggested that be the case because many of those numbers weren't as accurate as I would have liked to have been before you started doing a major calculation like that. But the progression that the city's had is going to allow you to utilize those numbers in a really timely period here to generate that number, to be able to just kind of plan out where you think your lost revenue might be for those fundings. So that's something that improved timeliness of financial reporting can really make a difference for the city. Some discussion points, still got to work on some of the sewer capital reserve accounting. The PennVest drawdowns, again, we keep adding layers. And I think that it's, we're getting better with it. Timing of deposits, COVID related a little bit here. But part of it's just making sure we get these deposits to the bank. We had several instances at the end of 20 where there were deposits that were put into the system in December, but really didn't clear till mid to late January in some instances. Nothing overly concerning, but just would like to see that process sped up a little bit quicker, getting funds into the bank. Pandemic related funding. So a lot of talk going to be coming up here on the ARP funding, the state local fiscal recovery funds as you start heading in. I know there's been a lot of discussion at the council level and the administration level. You're still seeing some of those regulations not quite in final form yet. You saw that they kicked the first or delayed the first reporting period. Just shows you how the Treasury is still trying to figure out exactly what they're looking for and how some of these funds should be spent. But a great opportunity for the city to really utilize those funds in a very creative and positive manner. And lastly, the accounting manual cross training. We're getting to the point now where we can get out of our own way a little bit here, not having to try to catch up on some of the past challenges and look forward to getting some of these things in place so that when we do have turnover, which is inevitable in some respects, the city can be prepared for the next man to step up, so to speak, or woman step up. No difficulties performing the audit. Key estimates, we have the allowance for doubtful accounts and loans receivable, capital asset lives, the liability for self-insurance related to workers' comp and the general liability insurance. Most of that comes from third parties, as well as the funding status for the city of Reading retirement plans and the net pension liability, and the other post-employment benefits liability. Again, proposed audit adjustments were noted in several funds, but continuing to decrease and no other reportable matters. A couple of new pronouncements coming up, biggest of which is going to be 87 for leases, coupled with its sister pronouncement 96, especially as the city starts progressing into this new municipal software. Starting to look and make sure when you're paying for 3 years, 5 years at a time, whether you have a financial commitment out there, whether there's a contract out there. But we'll talk about that as we continue to move forward here. As the pronouncement, we have till 2023 before this pronouncement's in effect. So plenty of time for that. That's all I have at this point in time. Then I'll open the floor up for questions.
Okay, first of all, Chris, I want to just thank you. This has been a long journey for quite a few of us on council, and starting out with years ago with the very painful process of knowing that the city wasn't meeting its requirements, and to see that the team has been able to pull together. And I don't know that any of us sitting on council maybe realize the effort that needs to be put into with a large budget like this with multiple funding streams and all these different rules and regulations to be able to have an audit for a municipality that only has one finding. So I just really think that we need to be appreciative of the work that goes on behind the scenes. We only meet here once a week during budget, twice a week, and have a overview snapshot, but we don't have any idea of the details that go on behind the scenes. So I'm just really proud of the city at this point and the work that's been done. But I also believe it's important that we plan ahead, and we need to have some discussion about how we stay on track. It's good we got this far, but it is just as easily to be able to get off track. And I want to make sure we have sustainability with these efforts.
Marcia, I agree. And one thing I'll just bring up that I didn't put in here, but on the grant side, still got to watch the grants at the city. There's still a lot of disaggregation between some of the departments. And one of the things we don't want to see the city that's happened in the past is where you're not able to, completely utilize a grant just based upon either timing or other aspects that will come up, or even just internal communication between departments. It's gotten better. I think finance has taken a greater role in a lot of those areas, but I know you also just had turnover in your grant manager position. So making sure that whoever's going to be taking on that role understands there's a lot of different pieces out there, whether it be public works, whether it be fire, whether it be police, whether it be in, within the finance department itself, just to make sure that all those reporting requirements and everything stay on top of them.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And first, I wanted to commend everybody in the administration, including Maria and your team, for having a very clean audit. It is a lot of information, not only for the new people, but even for those of us that have been on for a long, long time. I've always wanted to try to get extra time to sit with Chris and his team and dive a little deeper. So for anybody that has a lot of really in-depth questions and really wants to try to understand, some of the underlying development of what these final numbers look like, I would suggest you get maybe a half hour, an hour of time and see if you can set up with Chris and Jamar or Maria and get into some of those deeper questions. A lot of moving parts in the city, a lot of very valuable assets between the water and the sewer system, and then a lot of other ancillary parts as well. So we rely strongly on our audits to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that these assets are being maintained in a prudent manner, if you will. Those pension numbers are extremely exciting. It looks like some of the investment consolidation that we may have done a few years back has helped. Some of the savings as well, and on the separate managers and I believe actuary costs as well. We were actually doing so. It's good to see some of those results. So I just wanted to thank you and your team. Are there additional questions that general questions at this time? Again, if anybody has in-depth questions, they could set some time up. But go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Chris, and I just want to let everybody knows that planning ahead, that's the key for the annual audit. Every year, the city audit, since I have been here, we sit down with the accounting department, with the controller, and we put an agenda together. And this is like a teamwork. It's not only one person, it's everybody put their hands on it. So thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone.
And one minute, I did want to mention, Marcia, you've mentioned this before, the audit committee itself. I mean, that was something that was put into place a few years ago. And I think that's done a really nice job with staying on top of some of the findings that had occurred at the city in the past and making sure those items had continually been addressed. And, Mr. Waldman, to your point, I think if anybody does have questions about detailed, Maria, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would be an excellent place to come. I mean, we spend a lot of time going through more in detail at those meetings, and I think anybody will be welcome to join us. I believe, Maria, we'll have a debrief meeting here coming up soon.
Yes.
To talk about the audit. So I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions at that point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention Gordon and his team at PFM. They've been an extremely important guiding light for us, not only throughout the year, but specifically through the budget processes that have allowed us to make sure we look out 3 to 5 years. We keep the fund balance intact. We have a better view of what's going on. But it's certainly helpful to have the internal staff really got their hands around this and the accuracy of the numbers as well. There were times where we didn't even know if the numbers were accurate that we were looking at. So it's just a much better place. Additional comments, anyone?
Jeff, Lucine has her hand up.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Thanks, Linda. My apologies that I don't have my camera turned on. I'm going to try to resituate myself for the regular meeting. So please excuse not being able to see me tonight. But Chris, thanks. It's always nice to sit down and walk through this with you. In the 4 years that I've been in this position, I find this incredibly exciting, actually. And whether or not you're well versed in financials, I think what you said about communication is key. So you don't necessarily have to know how all the numbers work, but you absolutely have to have that open communication. And I want to take a minute to thank Marcia for being our council point person and representative with the audit committee, working with all the team members that have been named this evening. So although I probably will not be able to sit and go into depth of most of the questions that I wrote down tonight, I do think just some key points that cleaning up that balance sheet, I think, I agree, really gives us the ability to now move in and work on some things, whereas before that was just, really muddying and holding us back. So kudos on that piece. And I think that there's opportunity, as always, in the water funds with the additional fund lease agreements. I think that as that comes up for negotiations, and I'm thinking that's what you're talking about when you say pronouncements, right? So I hope that, council body and this strong team that's communicating will be able to address that as that comes up for increased revenue opportunities, especially in areas where, like in the general fund, when you're talking about public works and public safety personnel and issues there, we've talked about when we exit Act 47 and areas in which we have severe capacity issues like public safety, like public works. So I think it's going to be a key balance of moving that forward with that foresight. And, really, I think that as we move forward, like Marcia said, that sustainability is key. If we could see an increase in federal awards, I was looking at that sheet when you pulled it up quickly, and at 17,000, I know you said it'll start to increase a little bit with the COVID, but it's been decreasing significantly. So the fact that you tested, CBDG and some of those other areas, HUD, I'd love to see that Reading really have a good, strong foothold in increasing some of that federal funding that I know we used to see, that really could be helpful for our exit strategy moving forward. So just a couple of quick things. I'd love to talk to you more in depth about it, all of that. I don't know that it'll be done in 2.5 months, but always a pleasure to hear your review of the audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any additional comments this evening? Go ahead, Donna.
I won't go into a lot of detail, but I do want to thank you, Chris. This is certainly a relief to see check marks on the right side of things and see positive adjectives versus negative ones that we've seen in many years that several of us have sat here. But working with Irvine has always been really a pleasure. You guys are the top of the cream of the crop for your business, and our folks in City Hall internally, I think, are showing the expertise that we've come to rely upon them. And so my thanks to those internal and to Irvine for the audit. So thank you all very much. It's very reassuring as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Any additional comments, anyone?
Chris,
Yes.
thank you. That's my comment. You do an excellent job. Especially, I remember a few years ago when there was problems and you didn't fool around. You got them all straightened out, the ones I was concerned with. And again, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right. If there are no additional comments, Chris, I think you'll be back during the regular meeting for just a brief formal presentation or overview of the audit.
Correct.
We look forward to seeing you at that point. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
Chris.
again.
See you.
All right, council, we're going to move into the next item, which is the council solicitor, correct, Linda?
Okay, we can do that before the CD department.
So the CD department was scheduled for tonight for the budget review?
Well, yeah, we were going to separate it into CD department and then CDBG action plan tomorrow.
Okay, so, well, let's go right into the CD department. We'll just stay on schedule. I was confused there, so I'll turn it over to Marcia and Jamar. We're just talking about the CD department this evening.
That would be on the spreadsheet that you should have been able to download from the city website. So I'll just, Jamar, will you be taking the lead on this then?
Yes, Counselor, I'm just trying to pull up the document.
Okay, thank you. And please let me know either in the chat or whatever, if you have any difficulty downloading any of the documents we need to be looking at.
So in the budget book, we're going to be on tab 11, Community Development. And this afternoon, I did send an update of this file. Starting with the Property Maintenance Division, we account for the salary increases recently negotiated. We have a slight increase in advertising of $500. Temporary wages remains consistent. The two main increases tonight that I believe I teed up in the email that we wanted to cover under property maintenance is an increase of 25,000 for abatements, and then an increase of 12,000 for contracted services. These are related to one related to an aggressive quality of life education and enforcement campaign. This will allow for more abatement of properties that need to be cleaned up in order to not present a nuisance to the neighborhood. And then the Community Development Department will go through the process of billing the property owner, and then if necessary, pursuing towards a lien to make sure that we recoup those expenses. And then there's an increase on the contracted services line comparably to be able to have more companies qualified to do that abatement work. Jamal, did I misspeak on anything there, please? Do we have Jamal on the call this evening?
Jamal is not on the call right now. Can we let him in, please?
While we wait for Jamal to join, moving along, conferences and training, there's an increase there of $2,200. This is.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here, Jamal. Thank you very much for including me. Abe, thank you very much. I must admit, it is very frustrating that it is my department that we are talking about, and I have no voice in this. But again, Jamal, you represented everything correctly. Thank you very much. Good.
And just before we proceed, Jamar, I see Johanna has her hand up, but I would rather if we could go through and then we could take the questions, okay? Is that okay with you, Johanna?
But why isn't Jamal presenting on his behalf of his department?
Just to be able to explain, Johanna, the process has been for every department, Jamar presents the financial piece of it. The department heads are there to answer any questions. But if you look at how we've been presenting up to this point, where this has been consistent, does that help you?
Because in the past, this is the first time we're doing it this way, correct?
No.
I don't remember
This is
this
the first
procedure
time
happening
this
last
year,
year.
but we had discussed doing it this way in the past. So, you know, it's not that the department heads won't be able to have their input or the managing director. It's just that it's from the financial part of it, Jamar will be presenting. Okay, can continue, Jamar.
Under conferences and training, there's an increase there of $2,200. This is to reflect training needed for the new lead abatement positions under the property maintenance division. Gasoline increase of $1,500, reflecting the current price of gas that we're all experiencing, an increase of $1,000 for uniforms, $1,000 for postage, a decrease in the refund for housing permits. That's based on recent trends of not having to issue a lot of refunds for housing permits. And then the rest of the expenses there are related to fringe and withholding obligations. Questions, Counselor, on property maintenance?
Johanny,
You repeat, explain the abatement and contracted services, please?
Jamal, if you could expound further, I mentioned what we discussed this afternoon, the more aggressive approach in terms of the quality of life education campaign, and then enforcement and the more abatements that'll be done for properties that are presenting as a nuisance in a particular neighborhood. And the process we'll use to go after paying those bills by the property owners.
Thank you, Jamal. I'll be more than happy to expand on these areas. As you may have noticed, councilors, the quality of life requires a mission, and this mission is not a one-day job. It is actually a complete year of trying to reach out and communicate with the property owners as well as landlords in order to make sure that the city is in good order. And we've started this process back in last year when the mayor, council president, and then the managing director, Pedro Cortes, were going, and we have been going strong since then. To date, all of our abatement has been, the budget for that has been consumed, and we are requesting to increase this because we really need several vendors to be able to help us and be able to reach out to areas where we consider them nuisance and there is an accumulation of debris or unwanted materials. And that is an area that is going to be very challenging because some of these debris and nuisance are actually located in people's backyards. So entering in that area, we will require the law to support us. But that is basically what abatement for. We are increasing this in the magnitude of about $25,000 in order to make sure that we have more than one vendor that will be able to help us and respond to this. Some of you members have asked us, why are we not doing something about some of these properties? And the answer to that, actually, because we have one contractor and this contractor is retained for the year, we could not violate the current contract, and as such, we were at their mercy to when they will be able to pick up the materials. However, our alternative at this point, and you will see a request for proposal in the very next few weeks, indicates that we are going to retain several services to that. Abatement is not only the only tool that we will have. We actually have created a videotape, and the videotape is actually circulated, and it is on our website for those who are interested in seeing it, where we are encouraging our neighbors to team up with us and be able to help us with how we can make the city beautiful. In fact, part of the tape, at the end of it in there, you'll see the mayor giving recognitions and awards to property owners who they have taken pride in their properties. So that is where advertisement is going to take place. In addition to that, we are going to retain contractor services in order to promote and continue to promote a better quality of life for the city. These are a summary of what we have to. If you would like to see the breakdown for the cost, well, then I'll be more than happy to email it to you by the end of this meeting. Any questions?
I have one more. As it relates to the refunds, what would constitute a refund and why for all three, QOL, health permit, and housing permit?
I love your questions, Councilwoman. The refunds, basically, that is sometimes if there is a payment or an overpayment. If somebody overpaid, basically we need to recognize this. And as a city with a very complicated financial system, we have to actually put a line item to do so. However, in the past year, working with finance very, very closely and customer services, actually we have managed to reduce these refunds. So we'll keep a line item for it, but we are not really expecting a huge refund this time or reimbursement to the citizen, because the system, especially with the new system, Tyler Muir, it will be more accurate, and we probably have all the departments working together to make sure that they see exactly the same thing.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay. I don't see any on my screen at this point, so Jamar, and this will be a dialogue for anything that Jamal needs to clarify after Jamar goes over the figures.
Always, absolutely. Thank you, Counselor. Under the zoning division of the Community Development Department, again, we've accounted for the contractual salary increases there. There's a modest increase in advertising of $2,300. There's a decrease in rentals and leases of $1,600. One of the things to note under rentals and leases, we moved a lot of our copy machines across all departments to be centralized under the purchasing office, including human relations, CD, the various police divisions as well. So we saw some reductions across that specific line item in multiple departments. Contracted services, we have budgeted $129,000 there. That's an increase of $99,000 over the previous year. However, it should be noted that under the current budget year, we had amended the budget to move money into contracted services for zoning to help with their, Jamal, please help me here, the inspections.
I'll be more than happy to, Jamal. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say something. Is that a question?
No, the increase for contracted services under zoning.
That's, I actually was not directed to you, Jamal. I thought I heard somebody saying something. But in regard to this, excuse me, you may recall at a time that when we had a reduction in manpower, we really needed the additional help. And that is simply because there were a lot of building permits, zoning permits applications were accumulated. And in addition to that, we have seen an increase in planning and land development approaches. That by itself constituted the fact that we really needed more help and more staff, more professional services to come into play. And that is the time back in probably April of this year, we've requested an amendment to the budget to about $100,000 to reflect the additional professional services we have. The professional services entailed at that time planning review, as well as zoning assistance in many aspects of it. And there, some of it was actually including zoning inspections. Then we proceeded to the fact that there were still some delays with regard to the engineering services itself. And Stan and I have discussed this in length. Our engineering department is overwhelmed with all the projects that they are seeing. For that particular reason, we went out and we returned the services of engineering firms that will be able to help us with stormwater management as well as traffic engineering. So right now we have a fully functioning department. The engineering services will develop all the draft documents, send it to the city engineer as well as our acting director of public works, and the review process will be very smooth and will go on. These activities will actually generate a prompt service, less accumulations of zoning permits in there. It will definitely indicate to everybody who is interested in developing it within the city and putting a project whether it's a small project or a large project, that the land development aspect of it and the planning review are very friendly and very prompt in their services. So that's what you are seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is $129,000 that will be mainly to retain the services of professional experience, helping us with zoning, planning, and engineering.
Okay, now I see two questions now, Johanna and then Lucine.
Will this reduce the amount of time it takes to expedite permits for zoning?
Yes, the short answer to that is yes, absolutely.
So give me an example. It'll shorten it by how many months?
Well, it all depends on the complexity of the project itself, but a project that you are very familiar with as the supernatural store in Fourth and Elm, and everybody is waiting in anticipation to open up that beautiful facility itself. Some of the issues in here would have been shortened by probably a fold of 3 months altogether, because our engineers will reach out to PennDOT and will be able to talk to them about the traffic patterns and some of the stormwater reviews for the on-site infiltration would have been actually also expedited in that regard. I cannot tell you that it will by how many months, but I can tell you for sure that the very first review that we have received, instead of taking about 2 months, it was reviewed within a week time, and everybody was like, wow, this is what we really wanted to see. If Stan is on the call, probably he will testify to that as well. So we are hoping for a very expeditious one, but again, the effort here is a two-way street. Sometimes the developer may not pick up engineering firms or architectural firms that are fully versed in that. So it would make that the back and forth reviews will probably be lengthened. But I can assure you from our end, the instructions and the directions to all the staff, we are a very friendly city and we are going to do things in a very friendly manner. And we are welcoming all the developers and investors to come to our city.
Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you.
Lucine?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to commend you for really recognizing where your pinch points are, Jamal. And, then putting forth the ask, when we say, what are the resources that you need? Where are you having these difficulties? And then presenting them to council at this time. That's exactly what you need to do. So thank you for doing that. I think that I've seen exactly, what you're talking about in the areas of zoning and the delays. But I think that still there's conversations around codes that I know Council President has been trying to lead that need to occur, so that we have a full understanding of what you need and how we can support that, because there is development happening in the city. Out of a situation like a pandemic comes opportunity, and we need to be prepared and ready for the sizable opportunity for the city of Reading. It's very different than a borough or a smaller municipality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
When the gates open, the gates really open wide, and the volume is there. We need to make sure that you are fully staffed in the resources that you need. So I'm glad you're recognizing them, you're identifying them and noting them in the budget. But again, continue to identify those pinch points. We need to know where they are and how we can help, giving you the resources you need. And again, codes, I want to make sure that we have those discussions around codes, please.
And I want to make one comment because I think it relates back to a lot of the questions we're getting, and it's going to be a discussion I'd like to have with the managing director and council. But I'm thinking that as we move ahead into the next year, just as we have reports from the boards, authorities, and commissions, that we rotate through the departments and be asking questions that are on our minds, that we can have updates on what's happening. So it's not a matter of just passing the budget with numbers and expecting all the questions be answered during the budget process, but that we have ongoing dialogue about some of the key issues for the functioning of all the different departments. So that's just my suggestion moving ahead in the next year. Okay. Alrighty, gonna
Next
turn it
up-
back over to Jamar, and then Jamal can again help out.
Thank you, Counselor. Next up, we have the Trades Division of the Community Development Department.
Anyone? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jamar. It's all yours, sir.
Okay. The biggest changes here under contracted services, there's an increase in 20,000 over the previous year. Also, under the rescue plan, we had included some additional monies to help with abatements as it relates to demolition specifically. But the demolitions under the trades division are covered out of contracted services. And these are typically the unscheduled building collapses that we find encountered. Under gasoline, we actually have a reduction there in expenses. Excuse me, and then some nominal decreases, parking garage fees, conferences and training. Any questions on the trades division?
Okay, Johanny?
Did you just say that we added ARP funds to contracted services for demos?
So we increased the general fund side of abatements covered under trades. And then also, we'll cover this on a different day, but under the rescue plan, excuse me one second. You'll find abatement of unscheduled building collapses as well.
If I may expand on this, Councilwoman Sabina Freitas, there are two demolition programs that are conducted by community development. There is the one that is actually we consider scheduled demolition program, and that is by our trade built property maintenance when they are traveling around the city and they found out some of the properties are actually beyond point of repairs. These scheduled one will go through the CDBG fund, and we will schedule them, and you will notice tomorrow under the CDBG fund we will have a line item for demolition. But what we have done here is that we've requested an additional fund simply because these are the unscheduled, and the unscheduled is really a matter of weather. Like for instance, if we had the same type of winter as we had last year, where building roofs collapsed and endangered the neighbors in there, that was unforeseen, and as such we put a dollar value for it. If there is, God forbid, a house that burn and it is beyond repairs, these are the unscheduled funds in there. In anticipation that it may go over the $300,000 as the trend for this year happened in 2021, the $280,000 that you see on the screen has been completely consumed. So we've requested, and managing director was kind enough to say that we will spot you $200,000 if in fact needed. So that line item that Jamar mentioned, showed it to you in the screen itself, is what if scenario. If we have snowstorms that were as bad as last year, if we had fires that beyond salvaging, that's where the line item will come in.
Thank you. Donna, you had a question?
And this may be a little off track, and if it is, I'll rescind it for another day, but generally, how long does it take to get through this process of demolition with the funds that we have available between bidding out, for contracts and awarding them, because I'm getting some complaints from different areas that, and I've seen it with my own eyes, collapsed buildings that have been sitting for months without being cleaned up and demolished, and just concerned. So if that's for another day, I just put it on the plate. if that's not to be.
It's a very good point. Very simply, is that it is a concern, yes. And what we have seen is that obviously, as you indicated, Councilwoman Reed, we have to advertise and we have to receive bids. But again, because of shortage of manpower and what have you, what we have seen is that one sole bid is coming in way above the trend, and when we rebid the job, the same source came back with even more than that. So what we are trying to do, and this is the project that's going to happen next year, is that to create a multiple vendors who we can rely on that regard to expedite some of these things, so that we are not cornered and pigeonholed to one contractor. But we will have this discussion next.
I think it's a critical one to have, because it's been pointed out to me, and I've seen it with my own eyes from both standpoints, from what I see on the street as well as from potential bidders and concerns that have arisen on both sides of this issue. So when we can aptly and work on that, I would appreciate it, because people should not have to live beside buildings that are endangering their own and are sitting there for months and months collapsed. And
I agree with you, but at the same time, I would say, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
400 Tulpehocken is a clear point of reference here.
And could I ask, as we're moving ahead with these, we can start getting off into important issues that tend to be tangents. So let's make sure that they're talked about rather than getting into the specifics when we're doing the budget, and then be able to look at those as measurable outcomes for the different departments. So I hear what Donna's saying is, what's the time frame? I heard Johanny say the same thing. Let's be able to, when we revisit meeting with the department, to see where those stand. If not, we'll probably be here till midnight unless you guys want to make that commitment. Okay.
Just to put a
Anything,
button on it, there are requirements to do the scheduled CDBG demolitions, which is why we're trying to put more funding in that non-federal source, so that we have a little bit more flexibility to get that done.
Okay, so now we're into CD administration.
Yes, the last division for CD is the administrative department. There, the biggest increase is under contracted services, not services. And there, the increase is so it should be noted, under 2021, the 300,200, that's where we put funding for the Downtown Plus study, the Stantec study that is currently wrapping up. That was a one-time deal. In 2022, we've put in 100,000 to help with staffing flexibility. And Jamal, if you could expand on what that one is.
I'll be more than happy to, Jamal. Thank you very much. Again, I'll go back to Councilwoman Sahelnik when she raised the issue about the capacity and the manpower. Community development actually is in need of about 22 employees. These kind of like vary between property maintenance, sweep officers. We are adding 2 grants. One of them is the lead hazard abatement program, and the other one is the human health services program. We've heard you loud and clear when you mentioned that we need to add on another staff for historic review and in the planning. We need another individual to actually bring in for the zoning administrations, as well as in community development. Specifically, we have eliminated 3 positions from last year that have not been fulfilled. The program coordinator for community development, the deputy, as well as we are adding a new position for executive secretaries that will be able to help us. If all of these 22 positions are filled, we will not need any outside sources itself. But we are being very, very real. real heroes, and we are seeing what what the nation is battling with in terms of finding manpower to fill in these places, and we are not really about to rush into just bringing any individual to fill positions. We really would like to see qualified individuals that can help us with this. The last recruitment that we have had for planning and zoning are very, very helpful, but we went through an arduous process to vet our candidates, and we certainly picked up very good candidates. So what I have discussed with Jamar and the managing director is that if in fact we will be able to bring in an executive secretary and a project director for a project coordinator for the CD, then probably outside services will not be required. However, with trepidation, I will say that we will need these services there simply because the tasks and the responsibilities laid on community development continues to increase. We've added 2 grants, and probably we'll add another grant in the very, very near future. We will announce that to you as we get into that. So these tasks that are increasing in there, we certainly would need outside help to again help us in the same way as we have done with the other 2 divisions. So that's basically where the contracted services will be dedicated this time.
The total then for community development is $4,601,588 rather, a decrease of $166,000 over the previous year. With that, any additional questions for the community development director?
Yes, I do have a question for both Jamar and Jamal. As we move ahead with the additional federal funding. Okay, and as we look at it being integrated, is there a way that at some point we can present what each of those budgets look like and then the totals? Because it's my understanding that the Community Development Department will be providing the oversight for that funding.
Jamar, would you like to answer that? I'll be more than happy to help you.
So that is correct on the Community Development Department providing the oversight. In terms of the funding, Linda, I do believe there should be another session for community development to go over Fund 32, which is where the grants are covered out of and reflected under. I know it's not on for tonight.
Tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, okay. So then Councilor Goodman-Hendershot, tomorrow we will cover the grant positions and Fund 32, which is where the federal program funding is reflected.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And I have it up here on the screen, but we'll go over it in depth tomorrow.
And I'm just looking through, are there any other questions at this point for community development? Again,
Yeah.
understanding that the CDBG budget, the other components of it will be presented tomorrow night.
Johan and Lucine have their hands up.
I'm sorry. And for sometimes I can't see the whole screen, so Lucine, and then who else? Johanny?
Yes.
Okay, Lucine?
Yeah, very quick question. I noticed that you said there was, I believe, 200 some thousand for the Stantec, and that would be coming out. However, are we anticipating funding for implementation of what that plan and study is going to reveal? Is that anywhere in CD?
The implementation phases as basically will be carried into different parts of it. Some of that money has been already allocated in the ARP. So that part of it is already there. But again, what we are looking for here is that we'd like to get the board, the city council board, to bless and approve the study altogether. And in that point in time, probably we'll start appropriating some funds in the 2023. But there are some of the things that Stantec is already on it in there. And some of these things, such as the facade improvement, the blight, attracting the commercials, facilities and residentials, which are all things that we are working on at this point.
Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you.
Johanny, sorry, I was on mute.
I have a few questions. So the first one, as it relates to the grants received, are those temporary full-time positions? Because I'm assuming the grant has an expiration date.
Yes, they are temporary positions. The duration of the grant is 2 years.
Yeah, the Councilwoman's favorite phrase, there are two grants at this point with us, and the very first one is the Health and Human Services, and that started in July 1st of this year, actually. That grant is for 2 years. And let me announce to the world through this platform that the city of Reading is the only city in Pennsylvania, that has received a federal grant like this. No one else has received this. So the instructions from the mayor to the managing director is that, Jamal, you better do it right, because it does not happen very often. And trust me, it's 2 years and we are going to do it right. We are partnering with a lot of other health institutions to make sure that we benefit the best from that. The other grant, Councilwoman's favorite phrase, is the lead grant. And the lead grant is going to be for 3 years. This is the very first time that we got it. We've been trying and batting on this one for 3 years. And finally, we got it right. And we are now the recipient of $2.9 million for lead and $400,000 for the healthy homes, a total of 3.3. That gives us the chance to abate 150 homes in 3 years. We are also the recipient of, or the sub-recipient of the Department of Health grant for 10 houses in there. Our ambition in this case, in this one here, is that if you do the math very quickly, the city of Reading statistics show that we have about 35,000 dwellings, according to the 2020 census. The majority of those, about 80%, were built before 1978. So we have a stock of about 25,000 homes that we really need to, one way or another, address. So the goal is to do a very, very good job in these 3 years in order to be granted 3 more years and to expand our activities in the lead remediation department to similar cities as our sisters in Allentown and Lancaster. So, and the Department of Health, the HUD department indicated to us, you guys do a good job, and you will be seriously more considered for that. So the pressure is on us at this point to do this. And this project itself, we are carving and taking out some of our good employees from property maintenance to put them in this. This is a logistic matter that I was discussing with our human resources, Jamar, and the managing director, and I'm going to leave it in their good hands to give me 3 people that we will be able to help us with this. But we need to go up and running. You will see 2 requests for proposal, one for risk assessment and another one for paid inspectors. And then we are training 10 local contractors. 10 local contractors. They've been trained to help with the actual remediation work. So hopefully it's not only 3 years. I'm hoping, Councilwoman Summarry, that it is the beginning of 3 years and going on until we get rid of the lead in our city. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
More. So one, you mentioned the need for 22 employees. I don't see that reflected on here, or is it?
I believe it is, but Jamar, because Jamar and I discussed these things in several occasions. It's his spreadsheet, Jamar. I will let you.
I'm sorry, 22 employees. I don't understand.
What we are, okay, so let me start with community development. With community development, we are looking for the deputy, we're looking for the coordinator and executive, executive secretary. PMI, we are looking for the lead and the health, but we spoke about health, that we are going to outsource this to an outside agency, that they have physicians and they will be able to help us with that. And then we also in need of the sweep officers that are believe they are on the budget now, Jamar, because you showed me the budget this morning and there was a number from the part. Remember that item for the for the part-time that you said that we'll be able to use it to help us getting the staff. So I believe it's there, Jamar.
Yes, so we discussed the staffing flexibility was
Yeah.
to help
Thank
with
you. Yeah.
outside contracted work, particularly the positions that have been difficult to fill. The other, I'm just not, there's nothing about 22 positions, Counselor. That's the reference that has me a little flustered, because there's
Okay.
no increase of
And
20.
my apologies, I thought I understood Jamal state that we need existing vacancies or a desire for more employees to fulfill the demands of the job within CD.
That is correct. Yes, our desire is to have 22 employees, but I want to preface this by saying that it does not behoove us to have a physician and a community coordinator for the health program, since these programs are actually well established with the health institutions, and we will never be able to pay a physician the salary. So we are working with health institutions to help us in that regard. But the others, with regard to the lead and the sweep officers, we certainly will need these to be on board as we move
Yes,
forward.
so
I'm also asking because I don't see any allocation for part-time employees.
So there's one adjustment that needs to be made on the sweep inspectors, putting that funding back. And I now understand what you mean in terms of the 22. So we already have 17 property maintenance inspectors listed there. And then bringing it up to 22 includes the lead abatement staff that's as a result of the grant. And those are currently temporary. The hope is to make them permanent positions, just to clarify on that 22 number.
Okay,
If I'm sorry, Marsha, if we're considering adding part-timers as well.
So we already have budgeted for part-timers. There was some internal hope that we could make those sweep positions full-time, but we can't. So we have to put the money back in on the part-time side, and that'll be in there tomorrow when we review the Fund 32, and I can show you the sweep part-time position funding put back in.
Is related to the redevelopment authority, and it reflected in CD.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I did not hear, you were cutting in and out.
What role does the redevelopment authority play within CD, and is it reflected on this budget?
The redevelopment authority has its own budget, and they have we have that. As you may recall from last year, some of our staff, including myself, are actually partially compensated for some of this effort. So the short answer, no, it does not reflect that in the budget. And until the redevelopment authority is liquid enough to generate its own revenues, and there probably this is how we will remain.
That's my understanding as well.
and I would like to do a follow-up question to that, because as I see the immensity of all these responsibilities with the ARP money, with Reading Redevelopment Authority, with everything that goes on under codes, zoning and such, I just think we have to be careful of not spreading ourselves too thin to be able to accomplish all this, and then things not being done necessarily as a timely manner. And not to say that that's gonna happen, but I just think we need to be mindful that we're taking on an enormous amount of responsibility, as was said, the lead abatement program, all of those, and they require pinpoint management and supervision.
Thank you. Point well taken, yes.
Johanny.
Yes, I'm here. I apologize for the confusion, but the redevelopment authority, the money received, is that reflected as a revenue in the revenue section of the budget?
I don't think the redevelopment authority is paying anything to the city at this point. The redevelopment authority, at best, it will actually help abating the blight problems that we have. And to that extent, we have been very aggressive on this matter here to the very first time since the inception of the redevelopment authorities, that we are now pursuing blight very strongly and very assertively. We are about to launch the land bank that was presented before you back in September of this year. We actually have several properties that we reach out to the property owners, and they are in the process of donating these properties to us, as well as we are looking at some other properties that we are asking the owner to either bring it up to code, or we will press eminent domain. And to that effect, we have 5 properties are actually scheduled for eminent domain. Something that I'm not very proud of it, but something that also we need to show the whole world that we are very serious about fixing our city. We're not gonna just let the city fall apart and be bashful of not taking the next step.
I think there's been a lot of good questions. Is that all you have at this point, Johanny? Because I think we'll be revisiting this again.
Question in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Okay, so that's our component of the budget review for tonight. Again, CDBG is tomorrow. I'm going to have to respectfully excuse myself tomorrow night, but I communicate that to Council President. So good luck.
All right, thank you, Marcia. We're going to move on the agenda here to the council solicitor position. What we had Linda do for us was break out what we thought were going to be standard services that the solicitor would include, and that would be part of kind of the annual retainer. And then she also broke out for us what she believed would be supplemental and would be subject to supplemental costs. Her and Fred then had an opportunity to review both the structure of those services and the costs. And Linda, I wanted to ask if you didn't mind just stepping through real quickly what you broke out in those 2 sections, and then talking about the range that was discussed with Fred, and we'll open it up for questions from there.
Well, there are 24 regular meetings a year. So I predicted about 3 hours for each, 2 hours for the meeting and 1 hour of prep and or post work. Then we generally do about 4 special meetings per year, and I budgeted about 6 hours for that. And that's all covered on the salary side of the scope.
And you
then on the hour,
yeah.
Pardon?
And then you listed, before you move on to the hourly stuff, you listed out about 7 items of what that included, right? Do you want to step through that real quickly? You want me to do it?
It's legal services, regular meetings, special meetings, legislative public hearings. Provide legal services or assistance when requested at committee meetings. Provide legal services when we request it at executive sessions. conduct legal research and prepare opinions on matters of law as requested by members of council or the city clerk. When requested by council, the solicitor shall review legislation, leases, contracts, agreements. The solicitor shall prepare ordinances as directed by the president of council or a majority of council members, and review the ordinances prepared by the city clerk, and then give advice on legal matters, including citizens' legal inquiries to members of council or the city clerk when requested or as necessary.
Okay, great. And then that would all be covered under the kind of the general retainer. Go ahead.
Right, the annual salary.
And you
So
were-
we
Go ahead.
figure about 78 hours a year for the regular meetings, the special meetings, and the public hearings. Then the hourly rate for duties such as providing legal services where council as a body is exercising adjudicative or quasi-judicial functions, such as conditional use hearings, hard appeal hearings, tax exoneration hearings, etc. Provide legal services for charter complaint representation or mediation. Provide legal services for litigation beyond consultation. Provide legal services for bond issuances or financial transactions, and provide legal services for special projects with the approval of a majority of council. So there I figured budgeted for 4 quasi-judicial hearings a year at approximately 10 hours. So as you all recall, I've included $50,000 in my budget, and I think that amount more than covers the salary and the hourly rate.
So the recommendation was what, 3,000 a month for retainer?
No, we recommended 35,000 a year.
35,000 a year, okay, as the retainer base salary. And how much an hour for the supplemental services?
That has to be negotiated.
Okay,
I figured it at 200.
all right. And Fred, you looked at all this with Linda and you felt this was appropriate structure and rates?
I did.
Okay, council questions. I'm happy with the format and the rates. I just want to open it up for the rest of the body. Any comments or questions regarding the structure? We're not adopting it tonight by any means. We're just trying to get the framework in place. So as we vote on the budget, we have this thing pretty much implemented in the budget, and we can enact, who knows, by the end of November, and actually hiring a city council solicitor, or even sooner. Questions on the structure of duties, what would be covered under the retainer, the amount of the retainer at 35,000 a year, and the to be determined hourly rate. I'm trying to look for hands, so I don't see any. Wow. No questions or comments at this time? All right. Linda and Fred, I think we have to talk about next steps. If the body seems to be okay with the structure and of the duties, you know, as they would fall under the retained services and hourly services. We just need to talk about next steps. So when do we want to consider the appointment, and what knots do we need to tie before we go through that formal process? We don't necessarily have to cover that now, but if we can address that next Monday night, perhaps at our next meeting, we can do the appointment, or certainly by the end of maybe mid-November, if not the next meeting, mid-November, we can do that. Well, the next meeting will be mid-November. So let's discuss it next Monday night. I just need to know if there's any knots that we need to tie, if we need to negotiate that hourly rate, talk about how that would work, and then we'll go from there. All right. All right. If there are no other comments on that issue, we're going to move on to the next item on the committee, the whole agenda. Give me 1 second. I lost it. Here we go. That is going to be the redistricting commission. I think we are just about fully appointed. I know, Donna, you're still working on a kind of a.
Yes, the person I had asked had to withdraw. So I'm hopeful that by tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll have someone.
All right, so Linda, it seems like we're pretty much formulated as it relates to having a commission. Can you just walk us through the next steps on what it will take to get this commission up and running?
We'll have to make appointments at the next meeting,
Okay,
and then it's just getting the group together, having them discuss how they want to meet and when they want to meet.
all right, so we absolutely want to, no reason we could do them, we couldn't do them tonight, huh? That's another, what, 3 weeks out, isn't it?
2.
2?
Mhm.
All right,
Couldn't we ask just to a special meeting just to do that prior to our committee of the whole on Monday night? Is
maybe
there any
that's,
reason not to do that?
Yeah, we could do that.
yeah, that might be a little better. Just to get it running, because we got everybody pressured to get these in, so yeah, let's do that. Let's plan for next Monday.
Okay.
A special meeting before our committee, the whole meeting.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah. go ahead.
Is there a council liaison appointed to working with this commission?
Linda, you want to answer that? I don't believe so.
There wasn't in the past, no.
Okay.
Almost has to be an independent kind of body.
Yeah.
I guess they're given the charge and they figure out how they want to proceed.
I agree with that very much. So we should be staying as far away as possible. They need to make independent decisions and recommend back to us.
All right, we're going to do an agenda review. Give me just a moment to get there. Okay, so this evening we do have a proclamation. Well, first of all, we're going to have Pastor Randy Grossman from Grace Bible for the invocation.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, we haven't had consistent prayers.
You know, pastors are like everybody else. They have stuff come up.
I understand. And all right, so we have a proclamation this evening. I believe, Lucine, you're going to read the proclamation commending the bazaar at St. Constantine.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And Strat, I don't know if you have a copy or if you want to join me in reading that.
Strat,
What's that?
are you going to read the commendation with Lucine, or do you want her to read that?
She can read it.
Okay.
Okay.
You can make a comment if you like at that time. Linda, anybody scheduled for public speaking this evening?
Yes, I have 2. One will be by telephone and the other is connecting to the meeting.
Okay, we will check at that time if they are on. Did they tell you if they are on agenda items or non-agenda items?
Non-agenda.
All right, if they are on at that time, I will ask Donna to read our public comment guidelines. We'll move into the approval of our agenda and minutes. It will include the consent agenda items. I'm going to walk through them now. The first is award a contract for the Southwest Fire Station project to Kinsley Construction, Inc. in York, PA in the amount of $138,742. I'm assuming this is for an upgrade or a repair. Is Chief on with us? Oh, is he on the,
Yeah, hang on. Oh, there he is. I think. Oh. There you go.
There I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that there is for a project at the Southwest Fire Station. Both Stan and I, when we visited the station at one point, the slope on the ramp is kind of steep and there's a drop off that goes on to Lancaster Avenue that results in the apparatus twisting as it goes out there. There was a concern with that. We're placing a new apparatus over there. And also the steep angle on the ramp during like ice and snow when backing in, the apparatus slide back toward the station. So what this is going to do is lower the angle of the ramp. It's going to replace the whole ramp. It takes the drop off on onto Lancaster Avenue from 3-inch drop to 1.5 inches, and also reduces the angle back to the station. This is a CDBG project that was submitted back last June for 2021 and received the approval and went out for bid here in And this Kinsley was I believe, the only contractor that bid it on the job.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions from members of council on this project? All right, if not, we'll move on to the next item. This is the one contract we didn't award because we didn't have it at the time, was the award of contract for the HVAC system for the 9th and Marion Street Fire Station project to Shannon A. Smith in Myerstown in the amount of $1,026,120. All the other contracts were previously submitted. Any comments or questions by anyone on this contract? All right. The next award of contract is the purchase of 2 fire pumper trucks for the fire department from Glick Fire Equipment in Birmingham, PA in the amount of $1,290,446. Chief, did you want to give us a brief overview of this purchase?
Yeah, I think we've just voted on this previously. This was a change in the CDBG allocation in order to meet the timeliness test. These 2 apparatus will be an engine to replace engine 9 at 9th and Marion and engine 3 at the 3rd and Court Station. Part of the awarding of this too also, and the timeliness allows for CDBG, I'm sorry, for community development to spend the CDBG funding right away on that, paying 90% down right at the award of the contract, which also provides for a $40,000 savings on the apparatus.
Good. All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions by members of council? Any comments? Okay, if not, the next item is a resolution authorizing the city to enter into an agreement with the County of Berks for consolidated fire and EMS dispatch services for 2022 in the amount of $390,692.24, the same rate that has been charged in the current year. Any comments or questions about this specific resolution? Chief, real quick. Go ahead, Johanny.
You receive that.
If I will, I'll touch on it quick and Fred can jump in if he wants. Linda received this from the county. As in past years, they reached out here going into budget season to give us an idea of whether the cost would be in 2022. This formalizes the agreement with them. There's been nothing really in place for several years. Since the change back in 2012 or so. And what they're looking is to base their increases going forward on the consumer price index in the area. And it'll freeze things at the same price as 2021 for 2022. Whereas if we didn't get into this agreement with them, there would be an increase on that. So Fred wrote the resolution up here that authorizes to sign off on the agreement with the county on dispatching.
All right, any questions or comments by members of council? Johanny?
And are we looking to see this every year? Is this an annual contract that gets renewed every year?
No, this would continue going forward until such time as either us or them would decide that we want to change. We'd have to notify them 90 days prior to that. But we've been using their services since the late 90s.
All right, any additional questions? Okay, if not, the next item under the consent agenda, the final item is authorizing the reservation of $31,003.50 payable to the city of Reading or the PennDOT in the event the city does not complete the sidewalk work required for the 9th and Marion Fire Station project as required by the PennDOT highway occupancy permit. Hold on a second, that seems authorizing payable. Okay, so we're reserving that in case we don't complete the work, and then we would have to pay PennDOT. Otherwise, we retain it back to the city coffers.
Yeah, Jeff, this is a requirement for the PennDOT highway occupancy permit, and it's kind of a bizarre, red tape situation where we basically are reserving money for ourselves, but we have to do it just like everyone else. It's a requirement. So I needed to produce something. So we're doing a resolution that shows that we're holding this money, even though obviously we have $31,000. Should we, walk away from this project, which of course we're not going to, Strat, I promise.
All right, any questions regarding that specific resolution? Okay, if not, that's the end of our consent agenda items. We're going to have Abe this evening for the administrative report. And in lieu of the auditor's report, we're going to have a formal presentation of the external audit by Chris and Herbine. We then will have a brief overview from the Reading Area Water Authority, including Bill Murray and the chairman of the authority, Mr. McCracken. We will go into ordinances for final passage. We have just two this evening. The first one, there's been a request from the administration to table this. Is that correct, Abe? We're still waiting on some final.
Yes, sir. We just have a couple questions that we need to have answered as they relate to vesting of former employees. And as soon as that's resolved, we'll let you know immediately.
All right, so I need somebody to make a motion to table 75, if possible. And then the second ordinance, 80-2021, authorizing the transfer of $29,717 from the Public Works General Fund Street Division budget to the Public Property Division General Fund budget to pay for the new NECO replacement duplex water pressure booster pump system at the Public Works Center. This, somebody want to give us a real brief overview of what this does again? It's a tongue twister. Anybody have any comments or questions on that item? I know we talked about it 2 weeks ago. This is for the, obviously for the, right, I thought it was for sewer, I guess not. Stan on board with us? Stan, you want to give us a brief recap of what this item is for? Maybe Stan's not on at the moment. All right, we'll try to come back to this in a minute. Hopefully Stan will be on board. Does anybody have any questions on it? All right.
Yes. When I read the ordinance, I thought it was for sewer as well, but maybe it is not. So it's not too specific. I mean, I don't, until we find out what it is for.
Yeah, Stan's going to come on in a moment and go over it with us. We'll come back to it when he's able to unmute. And for the moment, we have one ordinance for introduction, that is authorizing a budget transfer in the law department in the amount of $70,000 from special counsel labor negotiations to general legal services. Fred, do you want to give us just a real brief recap for this transfer over?
Yeah, this is basically taking money from one line item that was dedicated to outside counsel for labor negotiations, which we did not use, and I don't think we will use, and using it for to pay for other outside counsel, which we were over, but which we were over budget for. We have more litigation. We have the charter board, which we're paying defense costs for. So this is going to be a moving it from one line item to another within law.
All right, does anybody have any questions or comments regarding that?
Jeff, Stan is back. I see he's unmuted now.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, before we go back to Stan, anybody have any questions? Okay, if there's no questions for Fred. Stan, we just had a brief question on ordinance 80-2021.
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick for you. My other computer, please.
Yeah, I can read it too. It's authorizing the transfer of $29,717 from Public Works General Fund Street Division budget to the Public Property Division General Fund budget to pay for the new NECO replacement duplex water pressure boost pump system.
Yes, sir. I don't know why that I knew that was coming up this evening and I was prepared. That is our potable water supply for the entire 6th Street Public Works Department. So when it fails, which it has done over the previous year, we have no running water.
All right. Anybody have any questions on that ordinance?
You need to have water.
All right. So that is it for the agenda. There are no resolutions. Before we adjourn, is there anything urgent for public discussion before we adjourn for a quick break and our 7 o'clock meeting? All right, if not, let's plan on starting right at 7 o'clock on the other link for our regular business meeting. That gives us 7 minutes. We should all be logged on in 5 minutes. Thank you.